Hello everyone. Yesterday we saw of the basics of React.js where we did a quick start to Hello World app. We had seen, we had updated the app class, app.js, and we had in fact seen whatever we printed that was being shown on the localhost in the port 3000. So let's go on to the next topic now. What exactly are we thinking to cover in the today's session? Let's go into that. We had initially yesterday seen everything about JavaScript, Node, Virtual DOM. We'll be covering a few other topics today. These all topics. So first, let's start with the import default and namespace. Like we had say if we have a base class there, if we want to see this class in some third party dependent classes, say some other classes, it is there, some other class, let's name it in this way, and we want to use a specific method, say of the base class says that eat, we want to use it, but will we be able to use it here? We can only the first thing that we can always do for the some other class is we need to import the base class is eat. Only when we import the base class, we will be able to use it in some other class. For that, we had seen that either we need to export it as default way, the base class. Let's not keep any, or we can directly write this export default here itself in the first line. That's what we had seen, right? We can also remove this default. Then what it becomes is namespace import. So let's focus on these things in our code base. Let's go to the code base. So we have index.js, that is the first starting point of our React.js application, where we have imported the app class, app component, app.js, where we have which we have exported it as default. So every class can have at most one default or can have multiple exports, right? If we write multiple classes in the same app.js, then we can have exported with different namespaces, with different names. Say app class will be there one. The next you can have some other dependent classes or whatever, the private classes, whatever you want to do. So if we are importing, only when we export it from the app class, we are able to import it in the index.js class. Say one fine day, what I think, I don't want to export it as default. I just want to do it as namespace. The error that you actually get is app does not contain a default export imported as app. What exactly do we need to do it here? We need to actually use the named value or the namespaced way. You can always have multiple classes also, so you can always segregate it with commas. If you want to have some defaults, and also if you have a default class, say app, and you have some other dependent classes in the same class, like test class, if you can keep, then that is how you will actually write it. Here we don't haven't kept it, so you would get errors. Let's go around with this, which we have not created as default. So that is one specific thing that we always need to be careful about. So let's see in the front end whether it's visible. It's visible, right? Now, if we say want to change it to the app class, we want to change the app class to React.js now. Say we write 1, 2, 3, just to see whether that's working or not. That's it. No other purpose. 1, 2, 3. You are able to see it. That is what is about the import default versus namespace. Uh, the next thing. Let's go to the next topic is function versus classes. Yesterday we definitely saw what is the difference between function and classes, and how we also wrote in both the ways. But when you write functions, you can never have constructors. Since you can never write constructors in the functions, that is why you can't have states. Uh, let's think in this way. Let's think in this way. That will make it easier for you to understand. If we have a class, whatever class it is, if you want to say give some count, the count is say 7. But in functions, if you write functions, that just uses the props. So you can just pass on the props and get the values in the results. So it's not stateful. It's the functions are stateless components, stateless React components. But while the classes are always stateful components. Why? Because you can have constructors inside it. We will be using React.component, we'll be extending that. You can keep pure React components. We can import React pure, uh, or you can maybe use whatever you way you wish. Let's go to our code base and try to see how can we use something. So let's introduce a constructor here. Constructor method. We will have definitely we'll have to call the super one before we do anything. Then let's have a state which will define it as say let's keep this only the count as 0. Sorry, here not here. Let's have the count as 0. What the next thing let's do is whenever somebody let's introduce one button here. Button. Let's have on click event. Whenever somebody clicks something, let's fire some command like increase the count. Okay, let's have increase the count. And let's name it as increase the button. Let's name it as increase, and let's write it here, say in the paragraph, hi my friend, you have increased the count. And let's write it as how will we write this dot state dot count, right? That's how you would write it as. But we have not introduced this method. We would need to. Let's also what we will try. So we will try setting the state. So you will always use set state. What you are trying to increase the count to this dot state whatever it is presently dot count, increase it by 1. That's what we are trying to do. Now let's go to the front end and see whether it will work or not work. So there we are at the front end. So we have hello Anupama. Let's learn React.js. Whatever we have an increase button. Let's open the inspect. Either you can do Control Shift I or you can use F12, whatever it is. So let's go to the component. I have installed React Developer Tool, which actually helps you in easily knowing it. Tool extension for Chrome. That will help me understand all the React tools. This is the one that I've installed. So go ahead and install this extension for Chrome. That will make it easier for you to debug the code. Like in components, you can see all the states, props, you can see what all components are there, how the states are changing, what is getting updated. So we will try to use the same one, the component. We can see the count is currently 0. So let's increase the count. We see some error has come up. Okay, what is the error? So it says that increase is not working. Why? Window dot event equal to window event. It is not able to find it. Why are we getting window here? Window message. That's the next question usually comes to our mind. So let's understand this fact. Say in JavaScript, what happens is the base component is always a window. So whenever you say something as this is what it refers to window. It does not refer to the class or component. It refers to the window. So you need to when you are using the constructor, you need to tell them that I am not referring to the windows states. I am trying to refer to the classes states. You would have seen there are other different base components. So in JavaScript we have window. I think it's global in some other. Okay, let's forget that fact now and go to our code base. So we need to tell them that please bind with this the increase method that I'm trying to tell you. Please bind this to this constructor of this component. That's what you actually need to do. And then you will be able to bind it. But you need to write what? This. Right. This. You need to bind this to this constructor's app. Now let's see whether it works or doesn't work. We'll definitely let's see. Increase one. You can also see it here. One it has increased. Increase two. Okay. So now it's working. Let's do a multiple times. It's working. It's working. So that is what is about constructor and how you can use constructor and you can bind maybe the methods with the events in our components. The other important thing that we actually need to be aware about is the life cycle hooks. That is extremely uh, useful, and we can use that at different parts of our application. Uh, let's go to our notepad first. Let's now see life cycle hook. What is it all about? Say when you are asking somebody to render your page, before rendering, whether the component will mount or whether the component did mount, whether component will update, component did update. So there are different life cycle events you can fire just before the or after the rendering it happens. You can effectively use that whenever you want to. You can always go ahead and maybe print it in the console log. You will be able to see it in the front end also. Let's try using it for just since this is not that difficult a thing. I'll try to just write it here before just this is another such method, so you are already getting all this. The rest you can see that the rest ones which are all crossed are not exactly used in the later versions of the React. So did catch, did mount, did update, all these things are used. Component will mount, component should mount. So let's use this one for now. And what shall we do? Console.log. In fact, logs are never should be written. Just like in Java, we don't like sysout, we don't commit it in our production code bases, right? There we will have to integrate the loggers. The famous one here in the server front end, meaning the Node.js and all uses Winston, and we will be seeing in React something else. We will see that those things in the later videos. Component did mount. Let's write one simple thing, nothing, right? So let's go to our Chrome and see. Yeah, see. Once you are mounting the component, let's refresh it again. So once the component is completely getting written here, rendered, the app.js, after that they are writing component did mount. That's how you can be sure of. You can always go ahead and check it also. How would you check it? Let's have one maybe the log, or else we don't need logs in the div classes. Let's not have it there. Okay, so this is how what is all about the life cycle hooks. You can effectively use it. Say somebody, a few things we can say. If somebody wants to change the state, instead of the on-click event, they want to change it in did mount or will mount or in these classes. They are trying to call this dot increase. But that's not the effective way of doing the coding. Why? Because the page gets rendered multiple times. So the set state will also work multiple times. You will see that it has reached beyond the stage, beyond the max count of setting in one component. You can't set state inside the life cycle hooks. You should always the best practice is always to have separate on-click events, separate event methods, and you should bind it in the constructor. That's the way to go about. Now, the next topic that we shall see is ES6. Okay. So what is it all about? Meaning we are writing JavaScript codes. Okay. And the JavaScript code, it actually conforms to the ECMAScript concepts. You if you want to know how exactly you should be coding or how you should not be coding, then you should always go ahead and see what is this ECMAScript. That is the standard. The scripting languages standard specifications are given in this ECMAScript. So we started with ES5, we went into ES6. We can use any versions in the any latest versions. So that is what we actually use in the JSX inside the render method. We had seen that in the yesterday's session as well, right? Now, say somebody is using some older versions of ECMAScript in the browser, some older versions of JavaScript browser. Okay, and we have written our code in the 2017 version, which is the latest version. So we are trying to render our code, which we have written in 2017, into some older browser version. So how will it work? That is where the Babel comes into picture. Babel is, you would have heard, Babel is the transpiler, or if not, that's okay. Babel is the transpiler, which actually transpiles the newer future versions, they say, the newer future versions, or say whatever versions. Today we have 2017, tomorrow if 2020 comes, 2021 comes, whatever version it is of, it will always transpile the newer future versions to older browser versions. That's why we always need to use Babel. That's a transpiler, not a compiler. Not a compiler. Why? Compiler is what? Compiler always changes the one language to a different language. Say if you have some Java codes, you are converting that to bytecode. So that is compiler. But transpiler is just helping us change the versions and not the programming language as such. So we need to use Babel. Let's go ahead and introduce Babel in our code base. How are we? How will we introduce that? We'll write it in package JSON. We'll see that how to write. And nodemon is another very important thing. Nodemon actually, you don't need to refresh your code base every time you write it. It will automatically refresh it. That's why this is pretty common. The refresh works quite easily. So let's go to our code base now and see how do we do it. Let's open our packages, right? So we have a few dependencies in place, but think about it. Will we use Babel or NodeMon in the production environment? Do we need it? No, right? Because you always need these things for the local browser testing. You don't need it for the production code base. You don't need to refresh, develop the code base, write codes, and then again test it in the production uh, environment. That you won't do. You would always do in a dev environment. That is where you can leverage the functionality of dev dependencies. So it helps you in just using the code base in the development environment only. Uh, so let's go to our Chrome and our famous site npm.js. So we will have to use a few Babel dependencies. Let's try finding out which are the latest versions. Babel CLI, we can use that. This is the one. So we had seen this yesterday. We can either install it in the CLI, or else we can include it here in our code base. So let's directly copy this into our code base. Double quotes. colon and the version. The, the version that we actually want to use is 7, 11, and 6. So let's copy it here. Similarly, whatever you want to install, for ease, I have actually copied it. I have saved it and kept it here, and I'll be just using the ones. We'll be copying it in our code base for now. So CLI is for the CLI version of the Babel. If you want to use core for all the code dependencies will come in. This is important preset environment where we are actually not telling them that which version are we writing the code in 2017 or 16 or 15 or whatever it is or the future versions. The transpiler itself, the Babel transpiler will understand that which version it is in and it will always change it to the past lower browser versions. And node1 is for refreshing the code base, and you don't need to refresh it always whenever you are doing the development part of it. How would you now? How would you now try to get all these in the node modules? The famous thing again, node in npm install, right? We had seen that earlier yesterday. So let's write npm install. It will take some time because it is getting the dependencies of Babel and Node1 from the npm.js, you can say, from the external third-party repositories. This is quite common. We will be seeing the later versions of it, how to build the code base. Like we always create jar and var files in the Java projects. Uh, that we will see how we do it using the Webpack. So there is some version problem. I think I have used some other version 7, 11, 6 on. It's telling it's deprecated, no matching version for Node 1. Okay, so Node 1 they are not getting. Let's quickly go to our Chrome and try checking what is the latest one in our Chrome. Okay, my bad. Sometimes we'll always land up into problems, and that is where we actually learn. That's also true. So let's again run our npm install. Hope it will work this time because we didn't have any other errors. We just had this nodemon error. While we come up with the next videos, maybe you can refer and see the ECMAScript concepts. How do we write codes that will help you on under, writing the right JS? It's always. So let's start a project. npm start. Starting our code base now. The application. So let's go to our Chrome now. Let's get code. It's taking some time. That is okay. Okay, perfect. So we can again maybe use our inspect, go to our component part, which is the React developer tool. See our app, we can see all the components. It's currently 0. We are increasing it. For the Babel part, we cannot test it here in my machine. That's okay. And the node one, it is actually refreshing. Whenever you do any code development, it will refresh it automatically. So coming back to our topics, the list of topics that we had prepared. So we actually saw what was the difference in import and how we can use the default one or the namespace, the named value namespace, export and import. That is what we saw. We need to bind our event methods to the constructor of the component because otherwise everything is of the window object. We saw the lifecycle hooks and how we can leverage it. There are different lifecycle hooks you can always go in and study, 6 to 7, but the others are actually deprecated in the later versions of React. So you need to prefix all the method names with unsafe. That's how it works, but it's not recommended. And never write the set states in the lifecycle hooks because it renders it multiple times and you will end into a deadlock. It'll run multiple times. So it's better to have different methods. We saw what was ECMAScript uh, and the different coding standards. What is Babel is used for and Node Mon is used for. So that's it for today. We will come up with separate videos and we'll see and learn further. We'll see Webpack, we'll see the later versions in the later videos. So that's it for now. Thanks a lot. Happy learning.